Hello, you lovely lot. Thank you very much for appreciating my first video on Thy Classics. This is the second chapter and I'm doing already something unique within the series, which hopefully in itself is unique. And that is something that I'm not going to give away just yet. Today, our first game that we are going to look at is going to be another very famous classics. Surprise, surprise. Lasker-Bauer. Many players would recognize immediately what's about to come just by hearing these two names, which is a good way and a good indication that you know Thy Classics. If you're not, if you don't, then please have a look. Join me, follow me. Let's have a look at what's going on here. I wouldn't really want to waste too much thoughts and time on the opening, because Lasker is playing something that at best could be described as iffy and unsound, not right even. But in basic principles, he developed his whole entire army. He's castled, so he would pass most club level standards, but there is a little bit of a problem here, namely that this bishop is misplaced. It stepped into knight c5. Black also ignored the fact that it would have been a good idea to control the center, put the pawn here, the knight here, and so on. So black is basically playing along, and you will find, especially with very old classical games, that playing an amazingly good game comes at a price, and normally the price is that your opponent is not exactly doing his very best. Alekhine put it very nicely when he said that to create an absolute chess masterpiece it takes two players, and it's very true, but it doesn't take away any credit from White, who played this game remarkably well from here on. So the position predominantly is about a so-called dark square strategy, where White is trying to exploit the weaker squares on the long diagonal, more importantly e5 than anything else, put pieces on it and basically exert pressure onto the the black king by these two bishops, and potentially with a rook lift onto the third. So knight e2 was played. The knight is also swinging across towards the king side, so everything is done for one big major goal, and that is a king side attack. And once again, I really don't want to talk much about the opening and how black is playing. Suffice to say that he's playing very well for White to make it happen. Now he's trying to set up a bit of a sneaky business on the long diagonal, so queen e2 is necessary, and yet another complete lemon. Although necessary lemon, if you don't mind me saying that, because bishop b5 may have looked a little bit annoying for black. I don't know. If rook c8, then this is kind of awkward to lose a queen like this, but to be perfectly honest, I don't think it was necessary to stop bishop b5. And now is the moment when we basically start talking about why this game has become such a classic and what we can take away from it. And that is this beautiful kingside attack, starting off with knight h5, and after knight takes h5 the fireworks begin. It's a very, very typical mistake on club level, and I see it all the time in my students' games, that they play checkers, not chess, where recapture is compulsory. In chess, recapture is not compulsory, but we very often, when we calculate, we neglect any other options other than the obvious recapture, and that was the case in this game too, where Lasker very cleverly started the fireworks by taking on h7 first, sacking away the first bishop. It had to be captured. He then took the knight with a check, which allowed him time to sack the second bishop. And this double bishop sacrifice is exactly the theme of this classic game, and this is what actually has made it classic. The double bishop sacrifice, a Lasker patent that later on became very, very famous, done by many other players. More on that in a bit. Now please note that taking the bishop is not actually forced, in the sense that although queen h8 mate is threatened and king takes g7 appears most obvious, f6 is also a potentially available move, against which there are many ways how White can continue the attack successfully. Almost always the answer is not to take the rook, which is not even viable materially, because then the two bishops would eventually outmuscle the rook. Queen g6 is a very important motif here to remember, with double mate threat here and here. And even rook f3 is a very, very powerful attacking move, bringing the rook into the game. Please note that now takes immediately fails to mate in 1. So both of these would have given white an irresistible attack. Having seen this, black decided to take. And now we'll see the actual main point of the double bishop sacrifice, and that is that after the check, the king has to go back onto the h file, because king f6 is met by queen g5 mate in 1. And after king h7, it's important to choose that square. White has now rook f3, rook h3, which looks like mate, but it's not. And that's what makes this game particularly awesome, because now black had e5 as a last resource to block this mate. So white had to go check, queen takes, takes, and king takes. And if we look at the material, we sacrificed two bishops and a rook for the queen, which is definitely not a good deal. However, Lasker saw even further than this, and he saw that in the very end, these two bishops would become unguarded, both of them. So very simple double attack on these two pieces would do the trick. And indeed the game continued. Bishop f6 takes the piece, and Lasker just built up an awesome attack. I really would like to show you here how accurately he's playing. He's not even entering dodgy lines like takes, takes when his rook would hang, and also by playing rook f1 he's actually creating a threat of taking on e5, bishop takes, rook takes f7 check, rook takes, and then taking that rook. On top of that, d5 is still hanging. Played rook b8, queen d7. Once again, not greedy, but clever. Now he's threatening with check and then mate again, using the same medicine twice. Black had to stop that, so he needed to vacate the f8 square so that the king could run around. But again, this comes at a cost, because now the f5 pin is super duper annoying. So now bishop takes here. It would be very, very strongly met by queen e6 or queen h5. They both do the same, creating a double attack. And in order to stop the mate, black would have to part with his bishop. So he kept on dodging all the bullets in a scenario where it was nearly impossible. And the coup de grace was this awesome rook sacrifice, destroying the last defense. Takes, takes, king e8, and after queen h8, white went on to win a rook. And the game concluded with this queen takes, which was the last nail in the coffin, when this lovely gentleman called Bauer realized that he doesn't really have a good chance to hold up 17 pawns with one king, and so he decided to throw in the towel. A really, really awesome motif, one that comes back a lot. So I would like to rewind this game to the crucial point where white played knight h5, black took it, and then the sacrifice took place. So basically the motif that we need to identify and sort of put it in our memory is that the black king is actually unprotected. There are no pieces in front of it, and both of the white bishops are looking down onto the two pawns in front of the king, the guarding pawns, and it is possible to eliminate both of them by force. And once that happened, we then bring in the heavy guys, the queen and the rook, to finish off the business. This has become such a classical theme and such an important motif that throughout chess history, almost all the big guns, the big names, had an opportunity to play a game like this. To show my point, I'm going to show you two more games. One of them, and this is particularly awesome because this time we are going to look from the black angle of this business, is Nimzovich Tarrasch. So now we are talking about two of the best players of the early 1900s. Right? Okay, Lasker was a world champion in the previous example, but he played against a total no-name. This time we are talking about two top 10s of the world against one another, and this time it is actually going to be black using this awesome motif, which again indicates a very good pattern recognition and the fact that he knew his tactics. No, he knew his classics, although back then they were hardly classics because they were up probably no more than 30 games between the two, 30 years between the two games. But Tarrasch was already aware of the motif, and I'll tell you what, the way how he put that into practice was quite amazing. Once again, I am going through the opening very, very quickly, although once again I would like to show you that the side that we are following has again completed development, castled, and controls the center beautifully. I don't want to sound sarcastic or bitter or all those negative qualities, but most of the time when I see my students play games, they fail to get to here, especially in unknown territories when they're playing an opening they're not familiar with. Even though it's not particularly complex, because we are not really required to calculate or to create plans or to come up with something new. You just follow common chess sense: center, development, king, safety. That's it, and that's what you see here, picture perfect. So let's see what Tarrasch does with this picture perfect scenario. He builds the position up really nicely, conquers the center, and lo and behold, there is nothing in front of the king. One bishop is already eyeing down there, so he knows business is on. He needs to open up the other bishop's diagonal, so he kicks off with d4, which is a very typical breakthrough in these positions anyway. It sort of blunts the bishop diagonal too, so after the recapture, now we don't have to worry about these mate threads because white's own pawn is blocking away, and this is just go time. Bang! Bishop takes, queen check, king back, bishop takes. The dead identical to the previous scenario. Move by move we are following the same attacking pattern, but now the differences kick in. First and foremost, if king took, then after queen check, king back, rook d5 mate in this case is actually unstoppable. Is that true though? No, it's not, because they have queen c5. Huh, interesting. Okay, never mind me. In which case after rook takes, no. First check, watch this, accuracy very important, check, king wherevs, rook takes, and again the theme is still the same that we stole from the Lasker Classics, is that in the end of this fireworks they get to sack the queen away for the mating rook, so we don't actually get to give a mate, but we pinch one of their minor pieces as a result of clever checks. Please note that the move order was particularly important, because if I had taken right away after rook takes, oh no, I can still check down the knight. Okay, so it didn't actually matter, but yeah, the main point is that after a number of checks we pinch again a free unguarded minor piece. Really awesome stuff. What is the next difference? The next difference is that f3 now does work, because queen g3 even loses to knight e4, hitting the queen and the bishop at the same time. So in this case, Tarrasch had to come up with a new concept against f3, and this is no less impressive. He played rook f8. Beautiful stuff, and again, so typical. You look at the position and you go like, okay, all of my dudes are in the attack except for this rook that is now threatening to come in here and then mate here. Or I can threaten with queen g3 now, because on knight e4 I may be able to take. That's actually not true move by move, because then queen takes g2 still wins for white. But the point is that the rook now does have a lot of jobs on the e-file, and white has to respond to this. The response was knight e4, but that introduced a new problem, and that was that after check here and bishop takes f1, the check is going to now win material on the second rank. Very, very, very impressive stuff. There was not really any other sensible defending move here available for white, so that's as good as it got. And yeah, knight c4 would have been met by the same fate, by the way. It takes and then check and take the queen. So that was it. Rook e8 and glory. This is how the game ended, and again, this is well worth watching. Knight e4, queen h1, king f2, bishop takes, and that's when white went like, all right, my time to stir the pot. Now he's threatening with mate as well as the immediate check. So this is the time when aggression is of absolute and utmost importance. You can't let the initiative swing over to white. If that were to happen, this whole entire attack would lose its value, and probably we would struggle to convert this game into a victory. So Tarrasch blew caution, or threw caution to the winds and went straight for it. But actually, it's not that he's being careless. He calculated it very, very accurately, and he will be rewarded by one of the most beautiful checkmates ever seen on a chessboard. Watch this. Queen c3, as per expected, and now the check fest begins. Check, check. Taking no prisoners. There is no value in hanging on to material. There is value in attack. There is value in initiative. Material by itself is worthless. Check. Awesome stuff. Please know that the king can't go towards safety towards the queen side. Has to go further out. Check. Now king e3 is strongly met by mating 1. So the king has to come further out. Now you need to also realize that in this position, black actually has the freedom to do literally whatever, because the king actually is blocking the mate threat by its own body. So right now white doesn't have a threat, but black on the other hand does have a forced mate as per in the game. Look at this. Check, king e6, check, king d7, and a super unusual mating motif, bishop b5. A stunningly beautiful attack. Once again, using the classics. He knew his tactics, his classics. How many times did I get this wrong in this series? I don't know. So he knew his classics. He knew the Lasker game. He had to know it, but he had to alter it as well. Because once again, when he went in for this, first of all, he needed to chuck in a pawn. And when he went in for this, the difference was that now f3 was working and king takes g2 was even more hopeless than it was in the Lasker game. So he had to see this extra motive of check and then taking on f1 and then winning stuff on the second. And the rest of the game was just sheer perfection and an amazingly good demonstration that in a position like this, nothing is acceptable but violence. And again, so many of my students in scenarios like this would tell me that, oh, I played here in... I can't really even come up with an idea of what would be remotely similar to what they would do, because I was scared of this and I was scared of this. You don't have the right to be scared when you're in exchange up, your opponent's king is totally naked, all your pieces are attacking, and you have got beautiful checks that will draw the king forward. The only thing you are entitled to here is calculation. You must calculate and brutally finish this game off. Nothing else is acceptable. Being scared especially not. So look at this. Sheer force, brute force. Whoopsie, and misclicks. So, bang, check, 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 luring the king further out. Check again, once again forcing the king further out, and the beautiful finish off, a remarkably beautiful and very unusual checkmate setup, almost chess problem, chess composition like actually in the finish. Beautiful stuff. And the list could go on and on and on about how many players in how many ways they use this motif. I will show you one more because I really do like this particular game. Whoopsie, did I do something silly here? I think I did. But lose no hope. I'm pretty sure that that's gonna be it. Yep. So now we are jumping almost the whole entire century, and we are at the Luzern Olympics or Olympiad, Chess Olympiad, England versus America. Anthony Mars against Walter Brown. Anthony Mars was an incredibly talented grandmaster in the 80s from England. Very, very talented, very unique style, really clever player, just an awesome chess dude overall. A lot to be learned from his games, and this is a good example. Coincidentally, the Tarrasch defense again, just like in the previous game. I will once again fly through the opening because that's really not the main theme, because as you can see, this whole entire motif that really has become the classic can occur in a large number of openings. So once again, the pattern recognition kicks in. We have got the 2 bishops trained onto the black king already. This bishop is a very, very sad bystander, and even though white does not have central presence in terms of having pawns in the center, it's crystal clear that his priest activity and his pawn chain guarantees him far bigger freedom than what his opponent can achieve with his pieces. Knight e4, knight takes, bishop takes, and I'm pretty sure that these were the moments when Mars was like, please don't take my bishop, please don't take my bishop, and that's exactly what happened. Having said that, taking the bishop would still lead to a comfortably advantageous position to white, because this queenside pawn majority here is already in motion, and it takes very few moves to actually create a deadly pass pawn on that side of the board. So brown went queen c7, Mars castled, rook d8 was played, and there we go. Once again we realize this dude is looking there, this dude is looking there. We have seen Lasker do it, we have seen Tarrasch do it, we can do it too. Check, check, and bang. Awesome stuff. And again, how cool is this? After the stock standard f6, as per the most commonly played defending move against this double bishop sack, move by move, we win the queen the exact same way as Tarrasch would have in the previous example. Literally move by move. So if Mars knew the Tarrasch game, make no mistakes, 120 million% guaranteed that he did know that, then he didn't actually have to calculate anything, or rather he only had to calculate it once to A, make sure that it worked, and 2, to actually immediately identify that he is operating on a similar pattern, in fact the same pattern, and he just went in his head like, yep, Tarrasch, or rather actually it was Nimzovich Tarrasch, and he just went like, yeah, bang, that's it. And so after the check, bishop takes, poor Brown didn't have a choice but to take, and here comes a slight difference again. After queen g5 check and king h8, he now had to give first a check on f6 in order to prevent this, which would have allowed black to swing across with the queen. And then again, the pattern recognition not only recognizes similarities but differences as well. Now when I take the queen, I can definitely not win one of the minor pieces on the way, and therefore this is at least dodgy, but maybe even problematic. Okay, I will have always perpetual checks, but that's far from ideal. So he needed to be inventive. He needed to put his bit onto the known classics by giving a check on f6 first, and only when the king went to g8 did he play rook c4, thereby creating a mate in 2 threat, which cannot be stopped, only delayed by senseless piece sacrifices chucked in the way. But essentially this is a mate. Please note that if rook here, then the rook swings across to h4, and then the mate threat on h8 is unstoppable. So this time around, what I have done is that I showed you 3 games instead of 1, mostly to show you that this is how you actually benefit and gain value from knowing Thy Classics. I'm not going to repeat this a lot of the times, or I don't know, actually I didn't really plan this one this way and the other one that way, but I thought that it made sense to show you a couple of very famous games based on the same concept, to see how these ideas work and how pattern recognition works in chess players' minds. Because I can guarantee you, if you watch this video and you have a game where your 2 bishops are looking that way, something will come back in your mind going like, I've seen it somewhere. And that is exactly why I'm making these videos, to help you to build this pattern recognition and to help you to bring you closer to these very famous games with their very famous messages. Lasker-Bauer gives you the message of sack your 2 bishops and give an awesome checkmate on the king side. It was also quite instructive, or so I hope, that I could show you examples of the same motif being used on both sides, black, white, and all the 3 of them were a little bit different. The main themes were identical, but there was a slight difference, a tiny bit that needed to be done differently in each of them in order to perfectly make it work. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've got a fair few ideas already in my head as to how to continue the series. I can only hope that this video and the upcoming ones will be as popular as the previous one was. Thank you very much for the support, the comments, the Reddit comments. So yeah, I would like to make it a big thing, so try to do your best to tell the neighbor that there is a lot of awesome stuff going on here. Alrighty guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will be back with more soon. Bye!